Welcome back to another episode of the Suits in the Stadium podcast. I am your host, Casey Coleman. Joining me on this week's episode is Bill Robertson. Bill has previously spent time with the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Anaheim Ducks and Angels, the Minnesota Wild, and most recently retired as the president and commissioner of the United States Hockey League. Really enjoyed my conversation with Bill. I think the biggest thing that stuck out, and this is something that has kind of been a common thread throughout the podcast, but he shared the story that when he was working the Olympics that were here in Los Angeles, he had originally signed up to work basketball or baseball. Now, he mentioned in the podcast there were also 8,000 others that had signed up to work those two events as well, and so he was asked if he would work team handball. Obviously, he didn't know much about team handball, had to learn really quick, but through the opportunity to work team handball, he made connections with people at the LA Times. He made connections with people in a tennis magazine, both of whom offered him positions after the Olympics were over, just because he was willing to say yes to something that maybe other people weren't willing to say yes to. He was able to make those outside connections. So really enjoyed my conversation. Hope you enjoy my conversation with Bill Robertson. Folks, please help me welcome in this week's guest, Bill Robertson. Bill has previously spent time with the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Anaheim Ducks and Angels, the Minnesota Wild, the Western Collegiate Hockey Association, and most recently retired from being the president and commissioner of the United States Hockey League. Bill, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Casey. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely excited. Reached out on LinkedIn. We were able to connect and find a time to chat, and super excited to jump in and hear about your experience in the sports world.
I look forward to sharing a lot of good stories with you.
Can't wait. We'll jump right in. What pivotal experiences in your education or early career helped you realize the sports industry was the right path for you?
Well, as a little boy, I sold souvenirs at Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington, Minnesota. I sold programs and yearbooks and then souvenirs for the Minnesota Twins, the Vikings, and at the time, the Minnesota Kicks, which was a North American League soccer league team. And I enjoyed every second of it. I wanted to be around sports. I really thought I was going to play professionally for the Minnesota Twins as a second baseman or third baseman, but those dreams went away when I couldn't hit a major league curveball. But at the time, I knew at a very young age that I was going to work in sports. And then when I went to college and graduated from Cal State Fullerton in Anaheim, or out in Fullerton, California, I worked the Olympics in 1984, and it was a volunteer position, and worked basically for about 6 weeks, really about 15 hours a day. And I enjoyed every minute of it. And I knew then that I was going to make that leap to be involved in professional or amateur sports.
Fantastic. In the ever-evolving world of sport management, how do you stay updated and continue to learn beyond formal education? Are there any ongoing educational experiences or resources you recommend?
Well, I think one of the things is the networking ability. I think that's been lost a lot because of the pandemic, for one, but there's other things that have gone on and happened. In particular, there's a lot of these sports summits. I think are a great education for young sports executives to go to and learn and watch and evaluate and listen, and then try to meet some of these people and put a name to a face and follow up with an email or a phone call or a text and say, I would love to spend more time with you. Those are the things I think that are really lost in today's young person's ability to want to get into this business. And then when they find out they have to work nights and weekends pretty much year round, that becomes problematic for many.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely not a 9 to 5, and we'll get into that work-life balance as well as networking here in a little bit. Next question I selfishly put in for myself because this was me coming into the sport management space. What advice would you give individuals who are considering a career in sport management but may not have a traditional sports-related educational and or work experience background? How can they leverage their existing skills and knowledge to break into the industry?
Well, that's a great question. It's one of, again, I go back to this whole concept of networking. You don't have to have a degree in sports management. And really, I don't believe when I was in school, sports management was just coming into play. So, and I know it's changed, and a lot of schools offer that as a graduate degree, but I'm not so sure that that is the best degree. A degree in business or speech and business communications is a great way to go, and I highly recommend that route to get into the business. But nobody is looking really anymore at necessarily what your degree is in, but did you get your degree? What else did you do in school
Sure.
besides? I think those are important things. Did the person work? Did they play sports? Were they involved in activities on campuses? That tells me that they're well rounded and they can multitask and do a bunch of things at one time. And there's no right route to get into the sports world anymore, and there never will be. It used to be somewhat of who you knew would get you into the business, but not anymore. You have to be attentive, sharp, detailed, multitasker. Those are the things, and a great networker to make sure you can get into this wonderful business.
Yeah, hitting on the network piece again. Love it. Definitely very important in this industry for sure, and breaking in. You've worked approximately 40 plus years so far in the sport management field. To whom, or excuse me, to what or to whom do you credit your longevity in the sports world?
Oh, I don't know if there's one person, but I have a lot of mentors along the way, that people that helped me. Somebody in Los Angeles who works with the Dodgers, Steve Brenner, was always a mentor and confidant for me in my whole career, and helped push me to get into this business. And then as I got in, I wanted to meet people in all sorts of different sports. And I wanted to meet athletic directors and associate athletic directors. And I wanted to meet baseball managers. And I wanted to meet broadcasters and the variety of people like that. So I don't know if there's one person who pushed me. I know my parents at a young age always said, "Go do what you want to do," and I live that dream. I look myself in the mirror every morning and say, "I know I'm very blessed to be able to work in the world of sports management."
For sure, for sure. Transitioning to the advice portion of our conversation, what are the key skills or qualities you believe aspiring sport management professionals should focus on developing, especially to stand out in a very competitive job market?
Yeah, well, one is you have to make an impression, and I don't mean be crazy, but you want to leave a lasting impression, and know the space. You can be forward enough to get to know somebody, but without being a pest, so to speak. And I really think that's really important. I call that the building of relationships, and that starts at a very minute level of meeting somebody, following up, as I said earlier, on a phone call or a text or an email saying thank you. I'd love to be able to talk to you a little further about this. And then as you're getting into the profession, what a lot of people don't do is they don't ask for the job. They just say, "I really like to be in sports and I want to do something." I think you have to go into meetings like that knowing what you really want to do. And sometimes you don't know exactly what they have to offer, but I know this, that if you can get into a sports organization and you can sell, whether that's tickets or sponsorships, you're going to have a heck of a easier time getting in the door than you would be as a writer, a blogger, broadcaster. Those are the more challenging. The PR people, those are the hard positions to get because they're so coveted by so many.
Yeah, definitely a theme so far in this season of the podcast is sales as your entry into the sports world. So maybe the path that people should look to take.
Well, I'll give you one story that can relate to this. When I worked 3 Olympic Games: 1984 in Los Angeles, 2002 in Salt Lake, in 2006 in Torino, Italy. In 1984, I signed up as a volunteer to work the Summer Games in Los Angeles. Those were the first corporate Olympics under Peter Uberoth. And I signed up to work either baseball or basketball. Well, 8,000 other people signed up to work. And they asked me the question, they said, "Would you go work team handball?" I have never even heard of team handball. And it's a very much a European sport. It is played in the U.S. And it was at Cal State Fullerton, where I went to college, ironically, the venue for it. And I said, "Okay." what do I need to do? And they said, well, you're going to help with the interpreters. You're going to do the box scores for the games. And I had a crash course in team handball all within like a very short window. And they said, if you can do this, there's a potential you can move on and do other things. And I met so many people during that time that were covering team handball at Cal State Fullerton. And I got a job as a writer for the Los Angeles Times, and a tennis magazine offered to be an editor just because I was working at team handball. So that's the experience of saying, if I would have said, no, I just want to do baseball or basketball, wouldn't have even gotten that opportunity. And that's really what's propelled me in my career.
Yeah, love that. Being open to different opportunities, not necessarily staying tunnel vision on the popular sport, obviously basketball and baseball, and it led to other opportunities for sure. The sports industry is known for its high pressure moments. How do you maintain composure and make strategic decisions during intense situations?
Well, I've always watched other professionals inside of a press box, how they react during games, and how they jump up and down or get mad at a call that's made on the field, whatever the sport it is. And I always thought that you want to be calm, cool, collected. I learned that from Steve Brenner from the Dodgers days. And what he had said is just be professional, try to help the media, but don't go up and down because there's so many games that are played during the course of a year. And I know, I mean, I wanted our teams to win, and there was times when it became interesting for me uniquely. And one instance was when I was with at the time the Anaheim Angels were playing the Minnesota Twins in Anaheim on a getaway day, a Thursday afternoon, and my my idol Paul Molitor was playing for the Twins, who I grew up in the same area that he did. I went to the same high school. He's a little bit older than me, but we became very good friends and still are. But he had a game-winning home run in to win the game for the Twins, and I put my hands in my pocket. I was very happy for Paul. It was towards the end of his career, and everybody in the press box they knew that I liked Paul Molitor, and I'm from Minnesota. They looked at me to see what I was going to do, and I gave no reaction. I just put my hands in my pocket, but was grim, kind of clenching my fist in my pockets so no one could see, my jubilation for Paul and his home run. That's just the way I operate. I've taught that to everybody that's worked for me underneath me, and said, you need to be professional at all times. And when you go up and down, you get this reputation of being more of a hothead or not really being professional in your position. And I think it's so important to be level headed the whole way through, not comatose, but level headed, and be professional, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's a great story for sure. That was your team and that was your hometown team and your hometown hero, but you had a job to do and
Yes.
you had to stay even keel. I think that's great.
Yes.
A word that we've hit on a few times already is the idea of networking. Obviously, very important in your career, whether you're starting, whether you're 40 years in, or anywhere in between. My question is, how can individuals new to the field effectively build a strong network in the sport management sector?
Well, I think number one is to go hear some of these people speak at events. You need to seek it out, and read a lot online. And when you see a sports executive go speaking at a Rotary Club or anything like that, I recommend young people to go to those. And that's how you start building your network. And at the end of the event, go up and introduce yourself to them and tell them what you're interested in. I did it all the time with announcers and writers. When I was a young boy working at Metropolitan Stadium, I would go up to all the broadcasters, whether it was Dick Enberg when he was with the Angels, the late Dick Enberg, or whoever it was. And I started talking to them about how do you get into this field and what do you recommend? And they would give me 5 minutes of their time. I know they were very busy preparing for their games, but I thought that was a really good way to start building the network, so to speak.
Yeah, I love it. Again, very important and vital to our careers in sports, and it's got to start somewhere. You also mentioned this a little bit earlier when we talked about getting into sports and realizing you've got to work evenings, you've got to work weekends. It's definitely not a 9 to 5. What is the key to maintaining a good work-life balance? How do you not get overwhelmed with your career and still make time for family and friends and things you enjoy doing outside of work?
Well, it's a very difficult thing to balance all that out and to be really good. And now, it was maybe a little bit different when I first got in because there was no social media aspects to sports. When the newspaper went to print at 11 a.m. Pacific time or 11 a.m. Central time in those things, what I remember is, okay, now I can go to bed and there's nothing that can be reported until tomorrow. Nowadays, it is a 24/7 media. There is no downtime, is what I'm saying. It's
Sure.
20. It's all the time, and I think that is really challenging to be able to stay up on everything that's going on. So for me, I always took taking my children to school in the morning and trying to be at their athletic or other events they were in was really important piece to me of being a good father and being aware. And I was able to bring them to games and bring them into the locker room. So they could see that environment, what their dad did for a living. So that's how I tried to balance it out. But when I was mowing the lawn, I was thinking about things I had to do when I got to work later that day. I mean, you have to compress everything. I never played golf until I got later in life because I never with a young family and a career that was growing. It was really that. It was family and my job. And I don't say that's the perfect balance, but now I enjoy some other things in life. And try to have hobbies outside of the world of sports, but I'm still a sports fanatic in so many ways and with so many sports, and I still love it, and still will continue to do some sports consulting to make sure I keep that flavor of being a sports person for the rest of my life.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a hard thing to balance. But yeah, I think we all have to tackle it in our own way, and it doesn't look cookie cutter per person. But I think, like you mentioned, involving your kids. I've had a few different guests that have talked about that, bringing their family to events, bringing their kids to events, and just having them be a part of your world definitely helps with that.
Absolutely.
You've hit on a few different things. I just want to ask this question in case you have any other insight on this. The sports management field, again, is a very competitive field to break into. Do you have any other tips, tricks, or insights that people can use to help set themselves apart in such a crowded occupation?
Yes. I touched on this a little bit, but I think it's really important to when you get into a meeting that you ask for the job. I've had a lot of people come in and sit down and talk to me and never bring up that they want the job or want a job. They want to pick my brain about sports, but they say, do you have any openings? And then if the person says, no, I don't have any openings right now, my next question would always be, Casey, to ask them, well, do you know of any, or do you know of another team that's hiring either locally or in your league? And a lot of times there are openings like that they know of because that's not every job is posted online. There are a lot of resources to find jobs. Sports Business Journal, the D1 ticker are a couple of places both in professional and amateur sports where you can find jobs. But I think still the best thing is when you get into a position, ask for a job if you want. That's what you want to do, and that's where you want to be. And a lot of people do not make that attempt, and that's a missed opportunity in my mind.
Yeah, you got to be upfront with what you want. They maybe don't know that you're looking for a position, and if you don't say anything, they'll never know.
Correct.
Uh, Final few questions, bringing it home. What is the most heartwarming or memorable sports moment you witnessed or experienced? Maybe something we as the casual fan would never see on TV, but you had the chance to witness or experience?
Oh, there's been a lot, but one that you probably would never imagine. The at the time they were the California Angels. Right after the Walt Disney organization took over, we played in the Hall of Fame game in Cooperstown, New York, one of the last ones they ever did. It was always in August. And the Twins were coming home to play, going all the way across country. They had lost 6 straight games. I was on the mound at the Cooperstown field, the famous field there, and the general manager called me and said that we're going to let go of our manager on the way home on the flight back from New York to Los Angeles, and that was Marcel Latchman at the time was the manager, and a really good guy, and the team was scuffling and struggling, and it was very sad. So the game is taking place, and now the game is tied 3-3 in the 8th inning, and both managers come out to home plate and said this is going to be our final inning. While the Expos were the visiting team, they went down, and the Expos became the Washington Nationals the following, I think, 2 years later. But the Angels got a guy on base, and they put in the bullpen catcher, a gentleman named Mick Billmeyer, who was with the Angels for many years, a minor league player, and was really a baseball guy. And I think he is still he might be with Baltimore now. And they put him up to bat as kind of a joke, but kind of a thank you for him. And the game didn't mean anything. He took 2 feeble swings, and I said, oh, this is going to get ugly. And the next pitch, he hit a home run to win the game for the Angels. Now, this is the bullpen catcher. He wasn't on the roster. He was a coach. And he was at that time in his mid-30s, and a wonderful young man, great sense of humor. And as he was rounding second base, he had tears. I could see it. I was on the field. He had tears in his eyes. And the game was not televised at that point, and all they could do is watch him go to home plate, and they poured buckets of water on his head, and he was just as happy as I've ever seen an individual. And I was so happy because it happened to somebody that was a really nice guy that had a great outlook on life every day. And I'll never forget that look of him crying going around the bases in jubilance. And to me, that's what sports is all about. And that's one story I'll never, ever forget.
Great story. Love that for sure. If you could switch roles with any athlete for one day, who would it be and why?
Wow, that's a tough one. I thought about that for so many years. I always really loved the way that Derek Jeter played the game of baseball, and how he carried himself on and off the field in a pressure-packed job as the captain of the New York Yankees. And I really admired the way he played the game. He gave 120% every day. He'd be somebody I would be looking at as a role model. But there's others. Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer are guys that gave so much back to the game of golf, and I really love to be them. To be Paul Molitor for a day and get his 3,000th hit with a triple, the only player in professional baseball to ever, Major League Baseball, to have a triple as their way to get to the 3,000 hit mark. That would be incredible too. So those are some of the people that I would love to trade. I'd love to have Jack Nicklaus's golf swing or Arnold Palmer's golf swing and be able to do that on a basis.
Great list in baseball and golf for sure. If you could choose one song to play every time you walked into a room, what would you choose and why? Sticking with the baseball theme.
Well, there's I've been asked this before. McFadden and Whitehead had this song called "Ain't No Stopping Us Now." That was played a lot in arenas, and it hasn't been played much anymore. It was a song more in the disco era of the late 70s, early 80s time frame, and that always gets me going. When I hear that song, I'll turn it up in my car, or when I play it at home on one of my favorite lists. I'll turn it up as loud as I can go and sing along with it. So that's a song that would get me really going.
Fantastic, fantastic. Final question. Sports often brings people together and creates unforgettable moments. Can you share a personal sports memory that left a lasting impact on you? Doesn't have to be an event you worked, maybe one you attended with your family, with your kids, or maybe something else, but one that really sticks out.
Uh, for sure. Game 6 of the 1991 World Series, Kirby Puckett had an incredible home run to win the game for the Minnesota Twins and propel them into a seventh game of the World Series against the Atlanta Braves. In the game, he made a game-saving catch against the wall in the Metrodome in Minneapolis that was incredible, that saved 2 runs. And then I believe it was the 10th inning, he hit a 2-run home run to win the game for the Twins and propel them. They eventually won the World Series that year. I was offered the chance to go to Game 7. I was with my wife at the time when we went to the game, and I was offered tickets for Game 7. I said, I don't know if I could ever top this moment in my life, and I didn't want to be there in case they didn't win it. That moment, when I see that highlight on YouTube or it's played on the Baseball Network, when they show that, and it was incredible. I had goosebumps just thinking about it right now. I have goosebumps because as I've stated, I was a big Minnesota Twins fan, still am. But that moment to me strikes as one of the most incredible baseball ideas, concepts, moments. The feel of exhilaration and my team winning. I've been so disappointed with the Minnesota Vikings never winning a Super Bowl, and this was as close as I got, and it was a moment I'll always treasure.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Bill, thank you so much just for taking some time to chat about your career. As you mentioned, starting as a volunteer with the '84 Olympics all the way through to being the commissioner and president of the U.S. Hockey League. I just appreciate so much your time and sharing a little bit about your journey and insight in the sports space.
I enjoyed it very much, Casey. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Suits in the Stadium podcast. You can still find the audio version of our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, and many more. New this season, you can find the video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Please make sure, if you haven't already, to follow us across social media platforms, including LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We release new episodes every Monday, so make sure you subscribe so you never miss a single episode. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next one.